Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today and welcome back to the Black Star Network. I'm Suzette Speaks, guest hosting today for my brother Farajii Muhammad, who is out. We have a fantastic lineup for you today on the culture. We're going to begin in Florida. You know what? We always causing trouble. Seriously speaking, there is a bill that is being considered in the Florida legislature that some lawmakers worry will stop the existence of Black fraternities and sororities on campuses across our state. I'm going to talk about it. We're also going to deal with the Supreme Court today. The United States Supreme Court is the only court in the land without a code of ethics. Why not? And should they develop one? I'm going to have my brother Shanadu Wokafor with me today to help me discuss and unpack that topic. Then we are going to turn to the State of the Black World Conference. This is a conference, y'all, that's happening in Baltimore in April. And I have a special guest, Kim Poole, who will be giving us a sneak peek. Then we are going to finish up with reparations. Yes, we're going to the West Coast. My special guest, Michael Imhotep, joins me to talk about what's going on in San Francisco. Y'all, did you hear this? Local leaders are possibly showing early support for a possible $5 million reparation for Black residents. Y'all, we're going to talk about it. Stay right here. We are ready to kick off today's episode of The Culture. Well, hey, everybody. Again, it's a pleasure to be with you. I'm super excited. Suzette Speaks here, TV host and attorney out of Miami, Florida, sitting in and filling the very big shoes of my big brother, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you, Farajii, for the opportunity to sit in for you today. So we're going to start with our first story, y'all. Directly out of the Florida legislature, we are seeing a bill that is highly problematic. We know that diversity, equity, and inclusion programs have had a very hostile environment as of late in the state of Florida. And we're seeing a new iteration of a bill coming through the Florida State House. This is House Bill 999. And the proposed bill, some worry, would block the existence of Black fraternities and sororities. I'm going to go to, there are a couple news sources we're using for this story. That would be News One. You can also find a story on this in The Hill, as well as WPTV, which is the local Palm Beach affiliate of NBC. But just to read a quick quote from that article here on News One, what is going on? Basically, we have a Democratic representative, Yvonne Hinson, a Democrat from Gainesville, Florida, and she has been advocating in the Florida State House for considerations that might inadvertently happen if this bill is passed, and one that lawmakers are sounding the alarm on, or whether or not this will impact student organizations such as Black fraternities. The bill states the controversial HB 999 bill aims to restrict the programs and activities that Florida universities and colleges can promote or support. It calls into question student organizations, groups, or activities centered on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Well, I have the right brother to help me unpack what's happening in my great state, the Sunshine State. You know him. He is a continuous contributor here. He is also a diversity, equity, and inclusion expert. Y'all, please welcome back with me today to The Culture, my brother, Shanadu Wokafor, who will be joining me now. Welcome, Shanadu. How are you, brother?
How you doing, my sister? I'm fantastic. Good to see you hosting.
Listen, y'all got me a little bit nervous, but I hope y'all will work with me and feel free to talk back. You know, this is an interactive conversation, y'all. So leave your messages in the chat, or if you're watching Team Replay, leave your comments below. We like to hear what our audience, the culture crew, has to say. So welcome, Shanadu. Listen, Florida is always going to keep us on our toes. And this proposed bill is no different. So let me just get your initial reaction. When you read about this bill, what was your initial reaction?
Yeah, when I first read about this, I wasn't surprised because we all know that Governor DeSantis is posturing himself to be a substantial opponent to Donald J. Trump. So again, I wasn't surprised at what was taking place. What did surprise me, though, is that in my lifetime that we would be fighting for things that my forefathers and ancestors uh, fought to get rid of. This idea of kind of going backwards, and not just in Florida. You see it in bills in Arkansas, and you see it with Greg Abbott in Texas. It is becoming concerning, but there is no surprise on my end.
So absolutely, I neither was I surprised. And again, if you don't know, in the Florida state legislature, Republicans have a super majority. So even though we've seen votes, I believe in this subcommittee, I think it was 12-5. Realistically speaking, Democrats don't even have the votes if it gets to the Florida House or the Florida Senate floor to block it, which makes it ultimately very concerning. So let's talk about what you saw in the meat of the bill. They are going after a wide range of programs. Again, we're worried because we think that, or some lawmakers have brought up the point that some of the organizations we have become accustomed to, such as fraternities, sororities, other affinity organizations around campuses, could be affected. So let's start with this. Tell us why such organizations, Black Greek letter organizations, are important to student life, because we know that this term diversity, equity, and inclusion is kind of all encompassing. And it is kind of vague, according to some lawmakers, in terms of what is being offered in this bill. So let's start by kind of unpacking why those organizations exist in the first place and what they do for student life on campuses across our country.
I think first and foremost, it's really important to preface that there would be no need for inclusion if white people weren't so invested in exclusion and being exclusive and keeping people out and not giving people regular human inalienable rights. That's number one. So when you think about Black Greek letter organizations, the first being Alpha Phi Alpha, if my I hope I'm saying this right. I don't want Roland Martin getting upset with me, but if my memory serves me correct, these gentlemen who founded that organization, they weren't allowed to join the other fraternities that existed. So that led them to start their own. And you go 100 and something years forward, and now you have 9 amazing dynamic organizations in the now National Panhellenic Council that not only bring culture, but have been the harbinger for excellence, for change, and for culture making in our schools, in our communities. So many great men and women are results of those tenets that are followed by these organizations. And moreover, they become the fabric, especially for HBCUs, for the culture of that school. And even in the predominantly white institutions, especially the predominantly white institutions, when you have your Divine Nine, as they're called, organizations, they lend a space for the minority folks there, especially Black folks, to feel welcome, to feel at home, to feel like they can lean on the culture of those before them. And when you look at the academic excellence, when you look at what folks who are members of that organization have done for society, I mean, at this point, you know, the D9 and those who are of that organization have given so much to our culture, to our nation. So what DeSantis is actually doing is he's trying to cut into the fabric of our excellence. And whether you're in a D9 organization or not, it is a threat to all of us, because where does it end?
Absolutely. I want to bring up a comment. I see you guys in the chat again. Thank you for showing so much love. I see Karina Denise commenting. And again, we're focusing here on Divine Nine organizations, historically Black fraternities and sororities. However, this bill could potentially affect others, including Latin-based fraternities and fraternities and sororities, as well as gender studies programs, any kind of ethnic studies programs. So it's all encompassing in terms of possible student-led organizations that could be affected. Now, there are lawmakers who are proponents of this bill. Again, we have Chevron Jones and others. Thank you. Karina Denise, thank you so much. Says this bill would affect Latin and multi-ethnic, exactly. Sororities and fraternities, not just the D9, of course. So we have a broad base of possible entities on campuses that have historically, as you just pointed out, provided a safe space, a home for inclusion in campuses that traditionally had excluded people, in many ways still do, and provide a place for reinforcement of Black excellence and pride and a home away from home, etc. So why do you think we have continuously seen kind of DEI as the low-hanging fruit for targets by, specifically in Florida, the Republican-leaning lawmakers? Why is the phrase or the catchphrase, diversity, equity, and inclusion now seemingly to be the target of yet another bill? Why do you think they like going after these sorts of programs?
I would always, well, two things. One, I think there is an affinity that white folk have for Black people in a very strange way. But more importantly, I always like to tell folks, when you think about this whole agenda of attacking DE&I, an agenda of attacking quote unquote wokeness, I think it's very imperative that we pay attention to what the census will be in 2050, where America will be a majority minority country, where white people for the first time will be actually the minority now. I think because of that, it is my opinion that white folk are trying to do whatever they can to stabilize and consolidate their power, even when that switch of the change of the guards, if you will, come to place. But furthermore, the attack on DE&I, it's so funny to me when you think of all industries where Black folk, Latinx, sexual gender minorities have been kind of kept out of the conversation. And now people are trying to rewrite wrongs. All of a sudden, white people are getting uncomfortable. You hear DeSantis say things like, I don't want white children to feel upset about being white. But then that means in theory that you're also okay with initiating and inculcating ideas to make Black folks and Latinx folks feel bad for who they are. And I think that is very, very dangerous, damning, and sad. And it's a fight that I think my generation and the generations coming after have to stand up for, which I think they already are.
Yeah, we're at a crucial juncture here in Florida. I think I was very optimistic at one point, but knowing again how the vote is basically spread, and there's a super majority of Republicans, it makes me very worrisome when it comes to what will end up happening with these programs. Can you talk a little bit more about the critical race theory, which again is not really defined in this bill? We have about a minute or so. When people hear this term, it has become, again, a dog whistle for many to indicate some kind of nefarious attempt at brainwashing children, first and foremost. And we know it's not taught in elementary, middle, high schools, college. It started actually in the law school forum. But for those who are still kind of spooked by this terminology, which is mentioned in the bill, but is not defined, what is critical race theory and how is it defined in your estimation?
I think critical race theory, in my estimation, is a high-level graduate course that discusses the. Let me take a second. That discusses not only the importance of what is going on in the African American race and the Black race, but how it is affected in a socioeconomic way, in an educational way, in a legislative way, so on and so forth. But it's very important that I emphasize that it is a high level. Like, it's not just that you went to college and this is something you study. I would say this is more of what's the word I'm looking for? A concentration for those in those high level graduate courses for those who are in school. However, in typical Republican fashion, they're buzzwording it to put critical race theory, wokeness, that it's being taught in your schools, which is not even true, ever been true, but they're co-opting this again, because if the truth is now pontificated, then maybe folks will look at them and question why they did what they did or why they even have power. That is truly the most important part. If people realize what is and what has been, they may question why the people who are in power are in power. And that's kind of my thoughts on
Getting
that.
deep. Thank you. We're getting deep. We got to take a quick break. We got to take a pause for the college show. We'll be back with more of the culture right after this break.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home. You dig?
When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Hey everybody, welcome back to The Culture. Suzette Speaks in today for Farajii Muhammad. We're talking with my brother Chinedu Nkofor, who is helping me unpack what's going on in Florida. If you have not heard, there is a bill being considered that possibly would block a myriad of minority student organizations on university campuses. It's being called an anti-DEI bill, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it has passed out of subcommittee and will be considered by the full House, and then possibly a version will go through the Senate shortly. We are concerned because many lawmakers are raising the alarm as to whether this will affect organizations such as Black fraternities and sororities. Historically, Black fraternities and sororities play a pivotal role in student life. And when I'm talking about it today with my brother, we can bring him back. Chinedu, thank you so much for unpacking some of what is being said in this bill. I want to use another quote I saw that kind of gives us, again, some context as to why lawmakers are so really concerned with this language. Some of it seems very vague and very broad. So let's go to, if we can, the quote that we see here, WPTV, which is out of West Palm Beach, the NBC affiliate. HB 999 opponents fear the bill would regulate student campus activities at Florida colleges. It reads, what campus activities are you attempting to regulate? State Representative Yvonne Hinson, Democrat, Gainesville, asked during a recent House committee hearing. Hinson, who served parts of Alachua and Marion counties, laid out her concerns and questions to the bill's sponsor, State Representative Robert Alex Andrade from Pensacola. He's a Republican out of the Panhandle. The campus activities that would be all discussed and considered by this bill are campus activities conducted by, he's saying, administration and professors in their position of roles of power over what students have on that campus. Student activities are not included, Andrade said. So we are hearing that the bill author is claiming that this is only for administration. It has nothing to do with what the students are planning in terms of their organizations and their affinity groups. Black Student Union, I saw you in the chat, was also mentioned, as well as several others. Again, not just Black-based organizations, Hispanic, Latino, it could be ethnic, for example, our Jewish brothers and sisters, as well as, gender studies and all types of possible classes and organizations could be excluded. Do you believe that this type of bill will have the kind of cooling effect that they hope it will have? That is, that there are going to be professors that are afraid to take on classes, that there are students that are not going to get the type of educational experience that students of the past have had, that is broad-based, that has cultural and ethnic elements and history. Imagine that involved. Do you think this type of bill will, in effect, basically remove all mentions of historical accurate in terms of historically accurate facts in terms of Black history, as well as remove the elements that we've been talking about from college campuses?
Absolutely. I think that what we're seeing here is going to distort historical truth for comfortability. What I find very interesting, anywhere else, this would be called imperialism, this would be called communism. Anywhere else, if you hear about something like this in Russia, we would be so anti. If you hear about this in China with Xi Jinping, we'd be so anti. In North Korea with Kim Jong-un, we'd be so anti. But for some reason in our country, when these things happen, especially in the South, there is this ideology that these are our democratic rights or what have you. This is crazy. This is lunacy, as I've said many a times. I think this is going to create a sense of fear amongst teachers, amongst professors. Think about those who want to be tenured. Think about those who want to feed their families. This actually disincentivizes them from telling the truth, right? And even if they don't speak the lie, if they're not saying the truth, then it gives more room for the lie to fester, if you will. I think this is also an opportunity, right? Where we hear this all the time where, we say education is power and a mind is a terrible thing to waste. This also gives us an opportunity to say that we are not bound and gagged by the nonsenseness, the nonsensical ideas of the government, where the truth will live on regardless of anybody's rule or regulation. Because I do recall once upon a time, we were not allowed to even be educated in any form. And that didn't stop us from learning how to read. And that did not stop us from learning how to teach. I do think that this is an important moment as we fight for our freedom and fight for our right to teach as we see fit based off of the truths that we've experienced and lived through, that we should not be stifled or scared or be made fearful simply because a law is coming into place. I think education and knowledge is so powerful that I hope this inculcates something in our young kids, maybe to do more educational TikToks, which I've been seeing, or educational reels, which I've been seeing. That knowledge is going to get out, whether it's in the classroom or not.
Well, that's a hopeful note, because listen, we're going to have to teach Black history at our houses and our church like we used to do. Hello, somebody, because it seems, again, this is quite an orchestrated effort to use public schools as a platform for this agenda, which is to remove certain histories and even groups that are based in diversity and inclusion from not only college campuses. My fear, Sinead, is that it's going to trickle down into, as what we've seen before, when they go to K-8 in high school as well. We got a hot conversation coming on in the chat going on here. I'm going to bring up a couple of the quotes from the Culture Crew. Thank you, guys. If you have comments and questions, this is your show, right? So please go ahead and leave them in the chat. Let's start with Janelle. I see you, sis, and thank you again for always being a part of the Culture Crew. Her quote reads, we need to meet their bold attacks by asking why they are seeking to roll back civil rights by advancing color blindness. Can you react to this, please, Sinead? Because again, sometimes you see it kind of cloaked in this, why do we talk about color? And it is kind of a red herring, if you will, because we know that these our programs are designed so that we have more diversity. And oftentimes, I would say affirmative action, when things started to open up in the 80s, you didn't have people hiring as well as colleges admitting in the numbers that you did after there was support by, diversity, equity, inclusion programs. So what are your thoughts on Janelle's comments?
My thoughts are very simple. That's exactly what this is. It's a civil rights attack. And what is so funny about that exact statement, how she presented it, is that we have to also remind folks what happens when we move out the civil liberties of people. Where do we exist at? Thank goodness for those engineers who came from foreign lands, who worked at Google and Apple, that are enabling us to do the things that we do today. What happens when you make this place uncomfortable for people who have different ideas or from different backgrounds? So it is definitely a civil rights thing. It's a inhumane thing. And I think sometimes we need to make sure that we are cloaking it in that way, because that's exactly what it is.
Absolutely. We're going to go next to my sister, Lana L. Thank you again for your support. Fellow Culture Crew member, always holding us down, says, I think DeSantis is being strategic with this move. An attack on MPHC is an attack on Kamala Harris. I think it's smart politically, but Greeks are going to kick his butt. I think, yeah, our election of the vice president, Kamala Harris, did bring diversity. They see, D9 as a threat. Thank you for the end part of that quote there. Appreciate that, Keenan. But yes, D9 has come to the forefront with the election of Kamala Harris. A lot of us already were quite familiar with their storied history and storied past. But now, is this maybe a power play to kind of get back at the D9 support and strong organizational capacities on the ground? So that for future, I mean, I've heard Brother Roland Martin say, we plan for the next 5 years. They're planning for the next 50 years when it comes to the outcomes of what this country looks like and what its institutions look like. Do you think it's, kind of a specific attack on D9?
Absolutely. It's a complete attack on Blackness. And I think it's important that we say that, because if you need an example, look at those amazing 8 years that we had voted for one of the greatest presidents, arguably in our history of this nation. And then look what we got right after. There's this idea of, even if Black folk are bringing things that could help everybody, it's this visceral feeling that Blackness is not good enough. And they're just using D9 as something, as a stud point, for their attack on Blackness altogether, on Black liberation. And most importantly, if you pay attention, what the folks at D9 were able to do is bring people together, the college educated and the non-college educated, white collar, blue collar, celebrity, every day. And that is a threat to the plight of white supremacy.
Man, it is for sure, I think, orchestrated in a way so that, again, the institutions that have flexed a little muscle, not a little, a lot of muscle within our community can somehow be targeted and even crippled, some would argue, going forward, by making sure they cannot be on campuses. Again, I've seen quotes, and I don't know if you could put up a quote I saw from News One, Keenan, Senator Chevron Jones, a colleague and friend of mine here from Miami. He represents parts of Miami and Broward County, said during a debate, that he is obviously very concerned. And again, I'm so grateful for so many of our political leaders here in Florida, even though they are outnumbered when it comes to voting. They stay very vocal and they try their best to bring light to, what's happening. So my question to you, Chinedu, is how do we even fight this? Because if the votes are, not there in terms of the balance of power in the state legislature, again, Republicans have this super majority. They don't need, Democrats don't even have to show up, and they would vote in a large enough number based on the layout of the House to pass what they want to. What do we do? What would you suggest, whether it's through, organizational structures, whether it's, we had a wonderful interview with someone from Black Lives Matter come through yesterday when we had to kind of cut away and do some work behind the scenes. But what do we do, the everyday person? So you read this and you say to yourself, this is crazy. How can you affect change where you are?
I think what's important, you can affect change by where you are, more importantly, by getting involved, not taking this as a joke. I think what you said about Roland, or what Roland said, is very, very pivotal. We're planning for 5, they're planning for 50. And if we're planning just for 5, then we have to keep planning over and over and over and over and over again. It's important that folks get involved locally with their community, and more importantly, that people are having these conversations. And I would say to my fellow young people, y'all, it's our turn. Our elders did what they could. It's our time to have these conversations and put some action on these conversations to make sure that folks are putting respect on our names. And lastly, but never the least, it's important to join some of these organizations, not just Black Greek letter organizations, but Black affirming, Black liberation organizations, because you need to be around like-minded people, because it's very, very easy to get lost in the Black struggle when you are surrounded by a sea of whiteness.
And Sinead, we have to stay encouraged, brother. We're going to have to hold the conversation right there. We got to take a short break. But after this break, more of the conversation with Sinead Okafor right here on The Culture. Stay tuned.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol,
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear. Black Star Network is peace.
Oh, no punch! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. It's Suzette Speaks, filling in for Farajii Muhammad right here on The Culture. Good to be with you. And we're going to move along in the conversation. We're going to pivot now to the Supreme Court. There's an article that came out in the Griot that talks about why so many organizations are now advocating for the Supreme Court to adopt a code of ethics. Now, I have to put on my lawyer hat here today because I know, as a student of law, having passed the bar here in Florida, one of the first classes we have to take is called professional responsibility. What is that, y'all? It basically teaches you as an attorney how to operate at the highest moral standards and moral codes. And there is no court in the land that does not have a code of ethics except the United States Supreme Court. If we could bring up our quote from the Griot so we could take a look a little bit more deeply at this subject. In the Griot, the story reads, many organizations are demanding the Supreme Court adopt a code of ethics to preserve its integrity. The Project on Government Oversight, POGO, a nonpartisan independent watchdog based in Washington, D.C., is among several groups that have proposed a set of ethical rules for the justices to follow. Sarah Tuberville, director of the Constitution Project at POGO, told the Griot that her organization has advocated for the Supreme Court to adopt, quote, a stronger ethical standard for self-preservation. That's real, y'all. We're going to bring back our diversity, equity, and inclusion expert and regular contributor here on The Culture, Mr. Sinead Okafor, who is going to come through and let us know what he's thinking about this. Now, again, I'm partial because I have to follow a lot of rules as an attorney. But why is it, do you think, that the Supreme Court of the United States has been rather averse to adopting its own set of ethics regulations?
Ooh, y'all ready for this conversation? I'll start and preface it here, and I have to. For one, our founding fathers were amazing people, but they weren't perfect. They aren't gods. I think we're starting to realize that a lot of things that have been set in stone in our country are due for a bit of changing, because they do not work in today's day and age, especially when you think about our Constitution, including so many more people today than when it was written. And with that being said, there has been many questions about how the Supreme Court governs and how they handle their situation, and even how they handle their appointments, or when people can be appointed or not appointed. I'm looking at you when they appointed what's her name?
Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Right before her, the white lady.
Yes, I'm looking at her face. Oh my goodness. The lady from the Midwest. I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yes, but the process they went into in getting her into her seat very quickly while President Trump was on his way out. But when Merrick Garland, almost a year before Barack Obama was getting out, that didn't take place. So there is so much to be done, but more importantly, about how these folks in the Supreme Court act. Why do they theoretically get to be above the law, and why don't they have to hold themselves to some type of standard that the people have to hold themselves to? So I think it's very important for them to have a code of ethics on what they should and shouldn't do, especially with our good Clarence Thomas doing some pillow talk with Ginny Thomas. That's out of line. And even the leak about the Roe v. Wade situation that took place around the springtime last year, there is something going on in the house. The call is coming from inside the house.
You know what, Sinead, and I could not agree with you more, because we are seeing a situation in which there is, kind of this, I don't know, secret handshake going on, where you have just mentioned cases that bring this to the forefront, right? So we saw Mr. Clarence Thomas, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, one of the elder statesmen, probably the eldest on the court right now, participate in cases that many observers would say he should have recused himself, right? So you have his wife, who was being called to answer questions with respect to her involvement in January 6th. We have, they came together and came up with this excuse as if they don't talk, husband and wife, about their politics and what she does as an individual. Ginny Thompson is a very politically active person. She says she has been before she married Clarence Thomas and remains so now. But what about that? Why are we seeing less recusals when it comes to what many people who are just, lay people looking from the outside would say, you have a relationship with this person, or, you seemingly would not be impartial. That's the key, because judges, especially on the Supreme Court, even though we know it has become much more political. Amy Coney Barrett.
Coney Barrett.
Yep. I was like, I keep looking at her face in my mind's eye. Amy Coney Barrett, again, who had never really, served for any long lengths of time, et cetera, et cetera. As you said, she was pushed through very quickly and had a political bent that people were really concerned about, right? Prior to some of her writings when she was a professor, really led to, those of us who basically predicted what she would be on the court, for the long term, for her lifetime, actually. So back to Ginny Thomas, Clarence Thomas, why is it okay? And I know it's not. See, this I can't even ask the question, because I'm like, why would it be okay for Supreme Court justices to pick and choose for themselves when they don't recuse themselves, when everyone else, like I said, if there's a conflict of interest in the state court, me as an attorney, I can raise it and I can say clearly, judge, this person, you can have judges removed all the time from cases, or cases removed from what they call forums, their location, because of bias, right? We have rules for that. Why is it that the Supreme Court, you believe, and again, we probably stand on the same side of this issue, but why do you think they would believe that they alone should be able to make the calls as to whether or not they participate and hear certain cases?
I don't know exactly, but it's starting to seem like there is some type of erosion in the Supreme Court, and at the same time, some type of connection between Supreme Court and politicians. That's what it seems like to me. When you think about some of the landmark cases that were argued, whether it be Brown versus Board of Education, or even Roe v. Wade, think about that time. They were able, that's in a time where, as far as history is concerned, that we weren't even as advanced as we are today. And to see how, I hate to say this because I have high respect for the courts, but it's becoming a cesspool for unlawfulness. And it's if you look at it and juxtapose it to what you see in everyday politics, you're going to see a similarity. And I don't know if folks think that they're above the law or greater than the law, but something has to give. And it's really to the point where I don't think the people are impressed with what's going on and who these folks are that are supposedly making the laws of the land. If you remember when Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, when he was going through his process, I said to myself, there is no way in hell this man was going to get through. But then he did. It was a tough process, but then he did. And that, when I saw that, even with all the stuff that was on his background, if you will, and all of the things that even Ms. Blasey Ford, as brave as she was to come up to say against him, when I saw that nothing changed, it was reminiscent of Trumpism. It was reminiscent of how did this person who said what he could do in Fifth Avenue and nobody will be bothered or grab women by their genitalia, how is that person becoming president? You're starting to ask those same questions in this realm of judgment. And that's why I think that corrosion is coming in. And it's becoming dangerous because this is a life appointment. These people are there until either they die or they decide that they don't want to be there anymore. And there's a danger in that. And that even in itself might need to be changed. And that might be one of these questions that are coming up in this ethics law, if you will, or this ethics code or what have you that they need to have, because things are changing and people actually have questions.
Absolutely. Speaking of what the public thinks, in this CNN article, I think it said the Gallup poll conducted in September 2022 said more than 50% of Americans say they do not have trust and confidence, as much trust and confidence, or not at all, in the judicial branch headed by the Supreme Court. So think about that. 50% of the American populace doesn't even trust their own Supreme Court. Now, that is such a daunting number that it begs the question, why not act sooner? Because without trust, all of our institutions break down, actually. Yes. But specifically, trust in the judicial system, that's what separates the United States from almost any, problematic, if you will, countries around the world. That is the law and order, that the fact that something can happen to you and you have a recourse, that a courthouse is there that you can walk into the steps of the courthouse and say, Judge, I have a complaint. Someone has wronged me. Or the prosecutor's office on behalf of the people can say this person committed a crime and they will be held to account. This is the beauty of, even though it's an imperfect system, that we have. So if we are seeing that the public trust is eroding, what do you think is the holdup? I really can't. I mean, when I look at it, I'm just like, without trust, there is no government institution, right? So at 50%, do you think that number will continue to decline if there are no code of ethics for the U.S. Supreme Court?
I think the trust in the judiciary will increase, the mistrust, if you will. And I thought that 50%, that statistic was interesting because it's not 50% Democrats, 50% liberals, it's Americans. So that means it goes through the gamut of Republican, Democrat, independents, libertarian, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is scary. And what I'm going to say, and I've said this before, if we as the greatest nation, the nation of law and order, and when people say that, I always ask, when we say that we're the nation of law and order, ask yourself, whose law and whose order? If we don't get our acts together, us as the greatest democracy, that's just going to be in name only. We're getting to the point where all of those great things that we were once known for are up for question. And where do I get this from? You hear our adversaries saying it. You hear them talking about how America is not as great as they seem. So I think I love this nation, and I believe that this nation has so much room to grow. But I think in that process, there's nothing wrong with saying, folks, we have an issue, but we also have an opportunity. And let's not waste time. Let's not dilly-dally on this issue, because in my opinion, once a greater amount, 50% is half, once a greater amount continues to lose hope, then where is law? Where is order? Where is trust? More importantly, where is that thing that Barack Obama helped many people find, and that was hope?
My
hope
goodness.
that betterness is on its way. We have to be very, very, very careful.
Yeah, we have so much to talk about. The comments are blowing up. We're going to read the comments after our break, y'all. Let me put up one more quote, though, from this article. Again, from The Griot. Thanks to our friends at The Griot. We are going to put up a quote again by Sarah Tuberville, right? Again, she's a director of the Constitution Project. And this second part is really what I want to focus on. Told The Griot that her organization has advocated for Supreme Court to adopt stronger ethical standards for what she calls self-preservation. Hello, somebody. The justices are blind, she says, to the fact that the public's faith in the institution is waning. And the public's faith is the only thing that gives the court's ruling any force of law, she said. Tuberville said the High Court's lack of a code of conduct, quote, diminishes the public's faith in the court as an institution and as a fair and impartial arbiter of the law and of justice. I think that really encapsulates what you just shared, Sinedu, because again, people can definitely take notes from around the world as to what it looks like when you don't have the trust in civil society and in governmental organizations. And when we don't pay attention to, what the heart and the minds of people, right, our public, our citizens are saying, we often find ourselves in trouble. So when you hear, again, there have been many suggestions, but they have remained averse. Tell us what some of the advantages are, whether that has been in the workplace. Again, for my profession and other professions, you're gonna have to have a code of ethics. What are the benefits, in addition to public trust, that you get from having a code of ethics?
I think you get a better work environment. That's first. People do their best work when they can believe in what they're doing. So codes of ethics, once, is something that not only the company can stand on, but the people of the corporation can believe in. It is a symbiotic relationship. And also, it is something that it's actually checks and balance. If you're not doing this, I can check you in the same way you can check me when I'm not doing that. And like I said, it builds trust, it builds honor, it builds respect, and it builds on the tenets of democracy and freedom. And I think a lot of corporations, they go for the code of ethics because they want to show that that's something that they stand on, but you got to practice what you preach as well. Because like I said, it's something for folks to hold someone on. So when they do have the code of ethics, a great benefit is folks in that group can now say, hey, our code of ethics says that you are to do X, Y, and Z, but I've experienced A, B, and C. How can we rectify it? Then you get people. Again, democracies only work when people are participating, when it's a participatory action. And it brings greatness, it brings diversity, it brings equity, it brings inclusion. And there's never a moment where a code of ethics is ever a bad thing.
Listen, I want to read some of these comments. I agree with you wholeheartedly. We're going straight to the comments from our chat. Thank you, Culture Crew, keeping us active in this chat today, y'all. We got to take a quick break. We'll be back with more of the culture right after this.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it.
This is about covering us.
Invest in black-owned media.
Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks.
We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible.
Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home. You dig?
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
Hey everybody, we're back on The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Susan Speaks sitting in for Mr. Farajii Muhammad. We're just going to go through some of the comments. Let's bring back Shanadu as we wrap up on the Supreme Court and the Code of Ethics that they probably should adopt sooner than later. Let's go ahead and read a few of your comments, guys, before we get to our next topic. We're going to start with, how about Janelle Fields? She writes, why won't Congress and the executive branch make the judicial branch behave? Aren't they supposed to be three equal branches of government? Girl, you said a word. Let's go next to Karina Denise. Let's do that. Hey, sis. And she'll be joining me tomorrow, filling in for Farajii. She says, this is a lifetime appointment. Blank needs to go. Senators need 4-year terms, not 6 years, in my view. Okay, sis, tell us how you feel. Also, term limits for them may not be a bad idea. She means the Supreme Court, right? They are lifetime appointees. They can shape for 30 years or more what the court looks like. Let's go to, do we have a couple more comments? I know we're going to have to take a quick break shortly. Let's go next to Langston. Langston, I saw your comment. Langston says Brett Kavanaugh got through the Supreme Court due to, in his opinion, white supremacy. What other job interview can you discuss? Beer and being drunk in America. Yeah, that was probably one of the most memorable for the wrong reasons. Confirmation hearings that we've had. And again, if we had code of ethics, you know, maybe we wouldn't even have a person who had such questionable backgrounds on the Supreme Court. Again, we have to take a break, y'all. Karina Denise, real quick, let's get one more. Appears that SCOTUS does not give a darn about the public's faith. The Supreme Court of the United States doesn't give a darn about public's faith. And why would they, when the conservative majority are drunken with power? We got to leave it there. I got to let my brother, Shanadu Okafor, go. And I appreciate you being with us. We got to take a break. More of the culture. We'll be back with Michael Imhotep right after this. Stay tuned.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
It's Suzette Speaks here, sitting in for Farajii Muhammad. Welcome back to The Culture. I'm so grateful that we're going to have the next contributor join me. He is no stranger to the Black Star Network. You've seen him all over, Mr. Michael Imhotep. He's going to be schooling me, really, because he is the expert when it comes to reparations. But there has been a movement going on in California, y'all. I'm not sure if you have kept abreast of what has happened in San Francisco. Well, there are indications that local city leaders, after forming a board, a committee, actually, to look into the value of what reparations could possibly be for what Black residents there have lost over time due to injustices of the past, would value. And they came up with, and I know the headline is that $5 million headline per residents who qualify, but there were actually over 100 different recommendations by this advisory board that will now go to the city's main board of governance for consideration. Now, I am so excited, yet even surprised, if I'm being honest, that the movement for reparations has gotten this far, so far that a city the size of San Francisco is thinking about putting a major policy initiative like this forward. Well, we're going to get to the bottom of this, and the devil, yes, is in the details. I want to welcome now, as a guest contributor today with me, Mr. Michael Imhotep. Welcome, sir.
Hey, Suzette, how you doing today?
It is a pleasure and privilege to be alongside you, brother, to be sitting here.
You too.
Thank you very much. And again, I am not the most, what should I say, knowledgeable about what has been going on in the fight for reparations. So I'm grateful that you're here and you're going to be able to shed some light on what's going on in San Fran. So what do we have here? I know, again, preliminarily, this is, what should I say, a suggested framework. No one's getting any money just yet. But tell us what you have seen as your initial reaction with what's going on in San Francisco over there on the West Coast.
Okay, and just very quickly, I'm a historian. I don't claim to be an expert on reparations, even though I know a lot about it. Okay,
I hear you talk about it all the time. That's why I call you.
Oh yeah, well, I'm a historian and I study history, law, politics, and economics, but I don't claim to be an expert on reparations.
Okay,
but what we have here is you have a proposal of a one-time payment going to African Americans who are eligible, who would be eligible in the city of San Francisco, not for slavery, because San Francisco does not have a history of slavery, just as generally speaking, California does not have a history of slavery, because California came into the Union in 1850 as a free state, not a slaveholding state. So this would be, according to the article from CNN.com called San Francisco Leaders Show Early Support for $5 million Reparation Payments for eligible Black residents. It says that San Francisco's Reparations Advisory Committee, which was created in 2020 to craft a plan to address institutional city-sanctioned harm inflicted upon African American communities. Okay, so this would be a one-time payment of $5 million, and it's not. Now, you have some on the committee who support this. However, generally speaking, understanding the finances of San Francisco, and San Francisco has a $728 million budget deficit over the next 2 years, it's unlikely that this will actually be implemented. Okay, but you have the California Reparations Task Force, which is at the state level. You also have a San Francisco reparations task force as well. And the $5 million were some of the more than 100 recommendations made by a city-appointed reparations committee tasked with the question of how to repair the damage of systemic racism, redlining, housing discrimination, things like this in the city of San Francisco.
Okay, wonderful foundation laid, my brother. Thank you for that. This is the CNN article we are referencing, guys. You can go check it out on CNN.com. It's up there. San Francisco leaders show early support for 5 million reparations payments for eligible Black residents. So my question to you, Mr. Imhotep, why is California like the standout? Is it just the progressive nature of politics there? I don't hear this coming out of other states, or maybe there are other similar programs or considerations being made. Of course, we've heard, a couple of cities do things like maybe give housing down payments.
Sure. That was Evanston, Illinois. So let me address that. Okay.
Go ahead, brother. I know you know the background. Go ahead. Yes.
Let's take Evanston, Illinois first, because the person who spearheaded that, her name was Robin Ruth Simmons. I interviewed her on the African History Network show for an hour, to break down what actually happened. Now, the state of Illinois abolished slavery in 1818. Evanston, Illinois, the city of Evanston, Illinois, wasn't founded until the 1840s. You had a lot of woke ass people running around who didn't do research, who said, oh, they should do reparations for slavery, things like this. Evanston does not have a history of slavery. So when you have a city, they're not going to do reparations to repair the damage of something that the city did not inflict. When you look at what San Francisco is doing or what they're proposing, they are saying specifically they are working to repair the damage that the city inflicted upon African Americans, not what the state did, not what the federal government did, because they don't have those type of resources. Evanston, Illinois is a city of approximately 60,000 people with a percentage of African Americans at 16% and declining. They don't have a history of slavery, but they had a rampant history of housing discrimination and redlining. And there's still some African Americans alive today who live in Evanston who were the victims of the housing discrimination and redlining. So this is what their reparations program, the $25,000 vouchers towards housing, was designed to remedy, not slavery. Okay, so when we look at reparations on a city level, and we have a reparations task force here in Detroit, I'm not on it, but I do know people on the reparations task force. They are looking at repairing the damage that the city did. You first have to understand history in your city and the damage that the city did to understand what to repair. California is very progressive because both the state legislature is controlled by Democrats. It's the most populous state in the country, and you have a Democratic governor, and that came through voting. Okay. The 500-page report that they released back June 1st, 2022 is the most comprehensive analysis of African Americans and what has happened to us since the Kerner Commission report came out in 1968. All right. So I encourage people to research what the California Reparations Task Force is doing, and they are going to the proposals for reparations is going to be distributed, if it passes the state assembly, based upon lineage. Okay, you'd have to be able to provide evidence that you are a descendant of a person of African descent who was here prior to 1900, or a person of or free African American here who was in the U.S. prior to 1900. The reason why they have to do it based upon lineage and not based upon race is because in the state of California, race-based policies are illegal. It's illegal to have a policy only for African Americans, and they want to make sure that if anything gets passed in the state legislature, it doesn't get overturned in court, which it will be, because Republicans will file lawsuits, and some brain damaged Negroes will also file lawsuits as well to block it. Okay, now at the federal level, Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, Section 601, non-discrimination and fairly assisted programs, bans race-based policies. So if reparations happens at the federal level, most likely what California is doing will be the model, because race-based policies at the federal level are illegal as well, which is why if we're seeking a legal remedy to a historical problem, we must understand both law and history.
Well said, brother. Okay, I'm following you. I'm reading the chat. Y'all come on through with your questions. I see a chat member, his going by Oil King, and in his opinion, he has stated that he does not believe housing vouchers, so to speak, to be reparations. I think we need to define terms, because you've laid out, there is a school of thinking that it goes back to, the institution of slavery. There's a school of thinking that there was wrongs committed by law against citizens of African descent and were sanctioned by a local municipality or the state itself or the federal government itself. And we can't get that. And I will talk to you about that after break why it hasn't gotten more traction in the federal government. But nonetheless, so what we have is a hodgepodge of ideas, and I'm grateful for some of the comments. I'm going to bring them up after the break. When it comes
I need to address that first
yeah,
comment.
go ahead and put up Oil King's comment. Thank you, Oil King, for being here, and I'm grateful for all my culture crew who are letting us know how they really feel. But this is what he wrote. He wrote, why is this considered reparations? How do you respond to that, please, Michael?
Well, reparations for what? The concept of reparations means repairing the damage or something. That's why you first have to understand what it is you're talking about. This is why a lot of arguments dealing with reparations I don't get involved in, because I'm listening to people and they don't understand history, law, politics, and economics. Evanston, Illinois has no history of slavery. So why is a city of 60,000 people going to pass a law to address something that didn't happen in the city and the city was not responsible for? The city was responsible for housing discrimination against Black people. Therefore, the city is going to implement laws to repair the damage that they are responsible for. We have to understand what it is we're talking about before we can seek a remedy for it. Reparations, the root concept means to repair the harm, to make you whole again, to repair the damage of something that was done. You're trying to go in the left direction, but don't understand you should go in the right direction. Now, you need to repair the damage of a legacy of slavery and decades of Jim Crow. It's not just slavery. Chattel slavery ended something like 157 years ago. Decades of Jim Crow segregation, redlining, housing discrimination, voter suppression. What we're dealing with today is the culmination, the accumulative effect of all that what happened after chattel slavery ended when the U.S. Constitution, when the 13th Amendment was ratified December 6, 1865. You have to look at the collapse of the inner Reconstruction, collapse of the Freedmen's Bank, understanding the redlining that was created by the federal government, understanding why you have African-American homes at a value of $48,000 less than comparable white homes, which is a cumulative effect of $156 billion less net worth for African-American homes than comparable white home. So that's dealing with a legacy that happens after slavery ends. So when we deal with repairing the damage of a history of slavery and all that happened after that, we have to change the laws and policies that were put in place that continue to inflict the harm today. Cash payments are not going to do that. Cash payments can be part of a comprehensive reparations problem, but anybody with any intelligence who understands the spending habits of African Americans know damn well if we all got $1 million a day, white people will have it all back by this time next week. And the only thing you would have done is stimulated their economy, but the laws and policies that now distribute the wealth, power, and resources will still be in place, still inflict the harm, and you haven't repaired the damage.
Well, we're doing work over here. Michael is really breaking it down. Let's put up Chris Big. I see your comment there, brother. It says reparations really is the wrong word. Again, we're getting context now to as far as damages go in terms of the law in the United States. Consequential damages is one type of damages we would be eligible for under the law. Okay, I'm getting into the legalese here.
And personally speaking, understanding white supremacy, I would take the name reparations off of it, because anytime you say reparations, it automatically brings up resistance. I would talk more understanding that most of the people who got to vote for these policies are white, especially at the federal level. Okay, I would talk about the actual policies and how it's going to help not just African Americans, but help America in general, because anything that benefits African Americans is going to help America in general. The executive order that President Joe Biden did for student loan forgiveness, that's going to move 500,000 African American families from a negative net worth to a positive net worth, but it will also benefit white people as well. It's going to really help a lot of African Americans, okay, and discharge a little more than 25% of our student loan debt is going to be discharged when you talk about African Americans, but it's also going to help a lot of white people also. So what's good for African Americans is also good for America. So when we present these remedies, when we present these policies, understanding that the majority of the people in the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate who have to vote for this are white, you also need to talk about how it's going to help them and their constituents as well, not just African Americans, if you actually want to get something accomplished.
I love it. We're peeling back the layers, y'all, but we got to take a quick break. I'm here on with Michael Imhotep doing work, y'all. This is The Culture. We'll be back with more right after this.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig? When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Hey, welcome back to The Culture. This is Suzette Speaks, sitting in for Farajii Muhammad. I'm here with my brother, Mr. Michael Imhotep, who is teaching y'all about what it is that's happening on the West Coast over in San Francisco. There has been a movement towards reparations for certain qualifying Black residents, and we're having a robust conversation here. I'm going to put up a few of your quotes. Let's bring back Michael Imhotep now. I see you in the chat, y'all. I see everybody, and I'm going to only be able to read a few. Let's go to a quote I saw by Mimi D726, a Culture Crew regular. Thank you for being here, sis. I see she writes that if the government gave us real reparations, and now this is a contention I've seen brought up many times when this discussion comes forward, Michael, the cost, right? That would bankrupt this country. Are we cool with that? How do we address this when we are having the conversation, whether it be on the municipal level, right? Or whether it be, state, or even next we'll talk about the federal levels. But what about the cost? How do we address that? Because I'm thinking $5 million possibly per resident who qualifies in San Francisco. Like you said, budgetarily, it doesn't even kind of comport.
That ain't gonna happen. Don't look for your check in the mail if you live in San Francisco. That's what people will say.
Not happening. So how do you respond to a comment like this?
Well, first of all, what are you repairing the damage of? You first have to analyze what happened to African people and analyze the damage that was inflicted to then understand how to repair the damage. Okay, this is why you have to understand the laws and policies that were put in place, the voter suppression, the housing discrimination. And one of the main ways that people have accumulated homes and have accumulated wealth in this country is through ownership of homes. One of the biggest programs to do that was the GI Bill. 1945, 1946, and from about 1946 to 1970, $67 billion was invested into the GI Bill. This gave low interest loans to veterans of World War II and who served in the military to get low interest loans to buy homes, start businesses, and to go to school, go to college. Okay. Largely speaking, African Americans were heavily discriminated against that, even though we served in World War II, even though we earned those benefits and our taxpayer dollars were paying for them. So when we talk about the cost of reparations, one, just giving a check don't solve just giving the check does not repair the damage that was done. Okay. And then you have people who say, well, our ancestors worked for free for X amount for 246 years, things like this. Yes, there were 262 skills, trades, and crafts that our people had in this country from 1619 to 1865. Now, how do you enforce that? What law or that? Now, this may go outside the circumference of some people's awareness. I don't play games with people. When you understand getting reparations, you have to have a legal foundation to be able to enforce what it is you say that you want. What law are you citing that slaves were supposed to be paid in the first place? Yes, slavery was morally wrong. I agree. Yes, it should not have happened. But when you study the laws of this country, when you study the U.S. Constitution, which is the first legal document that you should read, slavery was sanctioned by the U.S. Constitution. It was legal. So what law are you citing the slaves were supposed to be paid? This is why the legal arguments that we make for this have to be different than a lot of the arguments that have been made in the past. One of the legal arguments, and I've talked about it on this show, deals with enforcing the Black Freedmen Indian Treaties of 1866, which is what one of my teachers, Dr. Claude Anderson, has been fighting and enforced for years. And then more recently, Attorney Demario Solomon Simmons, who is of Muskogee Creek ancestry and who is a frequent panelist on Roland Martin Unfiltered as well. He's been fighting for that because that is an actual example of us getting some type of restitution or reparations from the 5 civilized tribes of Native Americans, the Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, Cherokee, and Seminole Indians, who all owned African slaves. And then after the Civil War ended, they were forced by the federal government to allocate land to those Africans that they own and set them free and give them membership in those Native American tribes, give them all the rights and privileges of Native Americans. When you studied Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, we love to talk about Black Wall Street. I've studied the history of it, but we don't understand that Tulsa, Oklahoma was founded by Creek Indians around 1834. And when they went into Oklahoma, they took their African slaves with them. And a lot of the early African-American landowners in what will become Black Wall Street, which was that business district, which began at the intersection of Greenwood, Arch, and Pine, a lot of those early African-Americans gained land from those Black Freedmen Indian treaties, which are still in effect today. But many of our ancestors were being pushed out of those treaties starting in 1941. I'm for what will ever work when it comes to repairing the damage of a legacy of slavery, Jim Crow segregation, and racism and redlining. To understand what will work, we need to understand the history of what has worked. And what has worked, and there's documented evidence of that, are the Black Freedmen Indian Treaties of 1866.
Heck yeah, I'm gonna jump right in here because I say just let him go, because I know this is a passionate subject matter for you. I'm gonna put up another, based on what you just said, sir, you're doing work, quote from Jacqueline Boateng, I think is how you pronounce it, because what you have just mentioned is that there are different aspects of what could be considered, and the term is probably imperfect, reparations. But Jacqueline brings up reparation can come in the form of housing, education, healthcare, employment, and farming. Hello, somebody, because again, Black farmers have been through it. So
we lost millions of acres of land coming from being discriminated against from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. I was
going to say,
inflicting harm upon us.
USDA has done by law some of the most heinous things and created the most damage and removed the most land, right, from people of Black heritage. So when it comes to the check, because that's, I think some people are very hung up on the dollar amount, but there's other forms reparations can take. Would it be better, or is it like you said, depending on what was lost in the first place, as a remedy of what law was in effect in the first place? But talk about the various types of reparations, even here in this specific case in California, in San Francisco, are being considered. Now, the headline gave you the $5 million per person, right? But there were other suggested remedies, over 100, in fact. So can you talk about what other, even in the broader sense or directly related to the San Francisco proposal, forms of reparations that are being suggested?
Various forms could be free college tuition, going a certain period of year without having to pay taxes. It could be allocation of land. For instance, just generally speaking, when you study the Homestead Act in this country, the Homestead Act of 1862, it gave over approximately 260 million acres of land, largely to white people in this country. They had to maintain the land for 5 years. and they had to pay the taxes on the land. Okay. And then after 5 years, the land was theirs. Okay. Well, you have tens of thousands of families, largely white families today, that still have land in their families that was given starting in 1862, but they gave away land for over 100 years. They kept giving away land up until about the 1970s or early 1980s. All right. Largely, African Americans were locked out of this massive land giveaway. That's the Homestead Act of 1862. Okay, this was legal, and this is an example of how we were being discriminated against. Then you have the Southern Homestead Act of 1866 that gave away about 45 million acres of land as well. So when we study the history here of massive land giveaways, then when you talk about housing is extremely important, because that's one of the main ways that people create wealth in this country. And because of redlining, which was created by the U.S. federal government around 1937, and what redlining did was they took a map and they drew red lines around areas where African Americans lived. And what happened was they made it either impossible to get homeowners insurance or insurance for businesses in those areas, or you had to pay a very high rate. Okay. And then we were discriminated against when it came to get low interest loans. Like when you have the suburbs that are being built after World War II. Okay. You had white people who were able to get 3% down on low interest loans to get homes built out in the suburbs. African Americans were largely locked out of being able to take advantage of those benefits we earn in our taxpayer dollars paid for. So we're locked in the inner city. Then the U.S. Interstate Highway Acts in 1952 and 1956 drive 41,000 miles of U.S. interstate highways all across the country. Comes right through Detroit, right near where I live. I live where Black Bottom was, right here in Detroit. It wipes out thousands of homes and businesses. Displaces about 1 million people. The article that I posted here called Bulldozed and Bisected is an excellent analysis from NBC News that documents this. Okay. Well, the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill that only 19 Republicans in the Senate and only 14 in the House voted for, that's going to start to repair that damage that the U.S. government did through the U.S. Interstate Highway Acts. Okay, wiping out homes, wiping out businesses. It's going to start repairing those neighborhoods where the expressways went right through. So housing is extremely important, especially now with the cost of housing increasing, because during the 2 years of COVID, they weren't building new homes. So you have a crunch when it comes to housing stock. You think I wouldn't want a house right now? Absolutely. That's one of, really tell you the truth, that's one of the first things that we should be going after, home ownership.
We got to take a quick break, y'all. I am enjoying this conversation with Mr. Michael Imhotep. I see you guys in the chat. I'm going to read more of your comments, but we got to take a quick break. Much more of the culture, talking reparations, right after this.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us.
We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us.
Invest in black-owned media.
Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks.
We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible.
Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys. This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
It's the culture. It's the culture right here on the Black Star Network. I'm Suzette Speaks, sitting in for Farajii Muhammad with my brother, Mr. Michael Imhotep, talking about reparations and what's going on in California, specifically in San Francisco, a proposal that has gained some traction into helping to make Black residents whole for past wrongs by the city and others. We're talking to Michael Imhotep. I'm going to read more of your comments. Keep them coming in the chat. If you're watching Team Replay, go ahead and leave your comment below, like, and share this video. So let's start with Karen. Karen Canera, I saw your comment, sis. Thank you again for being a part of the culture crew today. She said there wasn't slavery in California, and I think you said that too, Michael. There was and is racism. The return of Bruce's Beach, and I love the Bruce's Beach example, to the great grandson was an indication of, was the best example of reparations so far. He sold it back for $20 million. Do you want to make any kind of comparison there?
Well, when you read the articles dealing with the California Reparations Task Force, one of the things they talk about repairing the damage of is the theft of land, like with Bruce's Beach. Okay, and then in the San Francisco area, you have the Fillmore district. Okay, which was a district that was wiped out by expressways, and they had a lot of African American homes. It was in the 1960s. So there's a good article from the Washington Post from February 27, 2023. San Francisco debates reparations $5 million each for Black residents. Okay, and they talk about the Fillmore district in the 1960s was demolished, and this was a neighborhood once known as the Harlem of the West, and it displaced 883 businesses and about 20,000 people, most of them African American. Okay, so California has a history of this, but we see this across the country. So when we talk about repairing the damage, not just of 246 years of slavery, okay, but decades of housing discrimination, theft of land, racism, voter suppression, etc. Okay, so this is why you have to understand the laws and policies that were put in place that inflicted the harm, to understand the laws and policies that need to be put in place to repair the damage that was done.
Understood, brother. We are going to stay with our audience and viewers. Let's go to another comment. Chris Big, I saw this comment stand out. You wrote, thank you, sir. Compensated Emancipation Act paid reparations to slavery owners at $300 per slave.
That was only in Washington, D.C. That was the compensated. That was the compensated.
Okay.
This is the mistake people make. That was the Compensated Emancipation Act of April 16th, 1862, which was sponsored by a senator who was an abolitionist. It was passed by Congress, signed into law by President Abraham Lincoln, and it was about something like 2,900 petitions by slave owners that only applied in Washington, D.C. That did not apply to all slave owners in the country. All right.
Okay, and we're just gonna finish the quote, and then you can respond as well. So I used that number to come up with $4.9 trillion adjusted for inflation.
The
So
mistake
you go
he's
ahead and respond.
making, the mistake
Yes.
he's making is he thinks that applied to all of the African slaves in this country. It did not. That only applied to Washington, D.C. Go to the Zen Education Project, read the information they have on the Compensated Emancipation Act, archives.gov has it, etc. So this is why we really have to understand what it is that we're talking about. Because I hear people thinking that applied to all the slaves in the U.S. and all the slave owners. No, it did not. That was only for Washington, D.C., and that was in 1862 during the U.S. Civil War.
Okay, very interesting. Y'all teaching me here, and I'm enjoying the conversation.
I'm a historian. I've been studying history 33 years. Google my name. Visit my website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. There's a reason why I'm in 7 documentaries.
Okay, well, I think also maybe and just to play devil's advocate, they perhaps do know it only applied to DC, but are still using it. Okay, so
most people don't.
If they did not, then we're definitely glad that you have highlighted that. But if they do, I think just the number he's trying to come up with is based on one example. You disagree with that?
Most people don't know it only applied to Washington, D.C. Okay. And the other thing is a lot of people confuse what Great Britain did in 1834 with the Slave Abolition Act when they abolished slavery and they paid reparations to 46,000 British slave owners, and they took out a loan for about 19 million pounds, and that was for the 800,000 enslaved Africans. Okay. A lot of people can confuse what Great Britain did with what the U.S. did.
Okay, understood. Thank you. Keeping us on our toes and keeping us accurate. I appreciate you, Mr. Michael M. Hopetep. We're going to go next to, let's bring up Oil King. I saw this quote, just give me housing. I think when we were talking about housing, sir, this quote was used then, and he said, don't call it reparations. We have plenty of housing programs. So he said he doesn't need the title reparations, although it could be used to make Black people whole. I know you went kind of in depth with that. Do you think that is one of the, I guess, most reasonable or possibly, which I say, you use the word resistance, probably would be least resisted means of providing Black folks?
Coming from the federal government, part of it. See, we have to have comprehensive repairing of the damage. It's not going to be just one thing. It's not going to be just one bill. Okay. So home ownership, and not just home ownership, free property taxes. Because see, there's a history of African Americans having their property taxes over assessed, and then we lose our home when we can't pay the property taxes. This is one of the ways our land has been stolen from us. Over assessing property taxes, the heirs' property rights, when it comes to a loophole, when it comes to land ownership. And this is one of the ways that a lot of African-American farmers have lost their land with the heirs property loophole, which is, so say for instance, say if 10 grandchildren inherit land, okay, from their grandfather or grandparents, and then one of them sells the land to a speculator, part of their land to a speculator, then there's a loophole that allows them somehow to be able to take over the rest of that land. This is heirs property. All right. When you study this, we've lost millions of acres of land through that. So it can be part of a comprehensive repairing of the damage. But this is why you first have to understand what happened to us. And one of the mistakes we make is we try to start studying our history in slavery. As a historian and as a student of Professor James Small, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, and Professor Kabahai Kamene, I have to say, when we talk about repairing the damage and making us whole again, we first have to understand who African people were and what African people had before we were put into an institution of slavery that stripped us of our history, names, culture, spiritual systems, folklore, mores, nationalities, things of this nature, and put us into an institution that put us into the category of chattel. You can't start studying our history in slavery because you missed the thousands of years of history prior to that. So when we talk about repairing the damage, I want to be restored to the level that my ancestors had prior to slavery, not get a check because they didn't get paid during slavery. This is a totally different concept.
I was going to say that conceptually, I've never heard reparations placed as in what we would have been
I'm trying to tell you, we have to refashion how we think about repairing the damage. You first have to analyze the damage that was done.
That's very deep. I love this question. We got to take a quick break after this, but Lana L says, does the African History Network have a reparations class? I would love to.
We have history
You
class.
and me both, sis.
We have history classes that I teach that deal with not just the history of slavery, but thousands of years of history leading up to slavery taking place. I teach that on Saturdays, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's called Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. And then the class I teach on Sundays, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Black resistance movements from the Haitian Revolution, the U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, the Black Power movement. So we deal with understanding, repairing the damage, reparations, things like that in both of those courses. Visit my website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. You can register for those. And I'm also teaching I'm doing a free online lecture Saturday, March 18th, 12 noon Eastern Standard Time, in honor of Women's History Month, or Black Women's History Month. It's called Great African Women in History, the Mothers of Civilization. So you can register for all that at our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. But we do deal with understanding reparations better and repairing the damage and who we were before we were put into the institution of slavery.
I love it, y'all. We have more time. Listen, I got to get to a few more comments. I'm enjoying this conversation on reparations with Mr. Michael Imhotep. We got to take one more quick break, y'all. Don't go anywhere. We're going deep. I'm Suzette Speaks in for Farajii Muhammad. More of the culture right after this.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home. You dig?
When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it.
This is about covering us.
Invest in Black-owned media.
Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks.
We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible.
Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is roland@rolandsmartin.com.
We're back. I am Suzette Speaks in for Farajii Muhammad right here on The Culture, enjoying a deep conversation with my brother, Mr. Michael Imhotep. We're talking reparations, y'all, and we're going to bring him back now. I wanted to ask you, brother, about why the federal response has been so stalled. The last thing I remember is Ta-Nehisi Coates doing a wonderful presentation before Congress, making the case for federal level reparations. Where are we now with the federal response? Has the Biden administration made any moves, and why or why not?
Okay, so the biggest push at the federal level has been HR 40, which was first sponsored by the Honorable John Conyers here in my city, Detroit, 1989, the year after Japanese Americans, year after the bill to pay Japanese Americans $1.6 billion divided into $20,000 per Japanese American. So it went to about 82,250 for the being put into internment camps during World War II. The year after that, John Conyers introduces HR 40. And the 40 comes from 40 acres and a mule, which is special field order number 15. Prior to the coup plotters taking back control of the House of Representatives, you had, according to Congress.gov, 196 co-sponsors of HR 40. None of them were Republicans. I've heard that you had 217 co-sponsors. It takes 218 votes to get any bill passed in the House. Now, the problem is in the Senate, you're going to need 60 votes in the Senate. No Republicans support reparations in the House or the Senate, not even the black ones. So even with 51 Democratic senators, and I'm not sure Joe Manchin or Kirsten Sinema supported either, but you need 9 Republicans to vote for it. At the federal level, what really should happen is we have to push for the policies that we want and take the term reparations off of it. The majority of the people in the House and the Senate that got to vote for this stuff are white. 95% of the U.S. Senate is white, and you need 60 votes in the Senate. Okay, and one of the things that needs to happen. So, for instance, I posted this article here, and I've talked about it here on the show before. Racism has cost the U.S. $16 trillion Citigroup fines. Now, this is an article from September 23rd, 2020. I've done an extensive broadcast dealing with this. And it documents how over the course of 20 years, from the year 2000 to 2019, the U.S. economy has lost $16 trillion due to racism. One of the things this does is it shows how racism negatively impacts everybody in the country, not just African Americans. The same argument that I make when it comes to getting the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act passed is the same argument that I make when it comes to getting the John Lewis Voting Rights Act passed. And the same argument with repairing the damage of a legacy of slavery, Jim Crow, reparations, and segregation, etc. If you only make this a black issue, you're going to lose when the majority of the people that got to vote for it are white. If you actually, if you can pull up that article, because what it does is it goes and looks at 3 categories. And it says that black workers have lost $113 billion in potential wages over the past 2 decades because they could not get a college degree. Okay, so if you correct that, then they can buy homes, they could buy cars, things like this. This helps grow the GDP. This helps grow the economy. Number 2, the housing market lost $218 billion in sales because black applicants could not get home loans. This helps banks. This helps real estate agents, etc. This helps grow the economy. Number 3, about $13 trillion in business revenue never flowed into the economy because African-American entrepreneurs could not get access to bank loans. Most importantly, they go on to say the U.S. could have $5 trillion in gross domestic product over the next 5 years if those gaps and others were closed today. This is dealing with laws and policies. So when you repair these laws and policies, it helps everybody.
Wow.
So we have to, and what this study does, and there are others like it, it shows how racism is hurting everyone in this country, even though we may get the brunt of it. Okay. So we have to also understand how to market the benefits of correcting these structural inequities, as opposed to just focusing on how it's going to help African Americans when the majority of the people that got to vote for this stuff are white.
Yeah, I've never heard it framed that way, quite frankly.
My degree's in business administration, not history.
Yeah, and I'm thinking to myself, would people rather, and again, maybe commentators would agree or disagree, do you think that the majority population would rather shoot themselves in the foot than actually make money and allow black people to also make money? Like, that's what that's saying. Am I incorrect?
In business school, we talk about a win-win proposition.
Right.
If I want a deal from you, I got to explain to you what's in the deal for you, how it's going to help you. Okay. And that, even though you have a lot of people who mean well and their hearts are committed to this, that's not what's happening.
Right.
We have to talk about how correcting these structural inequities will help everybody.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay. Even though we'll get the majority of the benefit because we got the majority of the harm, this will help repair America also.
That's amazing.
Policies that are good for African Americans are good for America in general.
In general, I believe as well. Let's go to a few more comments, y'all. We have about 10 minutes left. Chris Big, I saw when you responded to what Mr. Imhotep proposed. Chris's opinion states when the damages begin is a legal question as opposed to a historical one. Thank you for your comment. Let's go to Lana L next. Thank you, sis. She wrote, HR 40 has been dismantled to garbage. Now, if we don't even have the votes in the Senate, nobody is voting for it in the Senate. What benefit does it have? Like, how can we continue to keep it at the fore? Many of us who, support one party or another, mostly the Democratic Party, see this as, something that they have kind of overlooked. Is there a way that the public at large can put this back into, the conversation, at the forefront of the conversation, where many people think it deserves to be, as opposed to kind of like, oh, it's a back burner, and I guess, wait on cities and states to do it instead? What are your thoughts?
Okay, first thing that has to happen is America needs a massive history lesson, because Americans are very ignorant of history. I'm not just talking about African Americans. I'm talking about Americans in general. One of the good things about Juneteenth becoming a federal holiday is it can become very powerful if we use it correctly, because Juneteenth is the only federal holiday that deals with slavery. Okay, this is an opportunity to have a national conversation of not just about slavery and the harm that was inflicted upon African Americans, but what happened after slavery ended. Okay. The collapse of Reconstruction, the collapse of the Freedmen's Bank in 1874, and African Americans lost $2.9 million in deposits. How our land was taken away after Reconstruction ended, the voter suppression that was implemented. And then also, a lot of people don't know that you have between 8,000 and 20,000 white Southerners who fled the U.S. and they went to Venezuela, Cuba, and Brazil, because slavery was still legal there, because they did not want to live under rule of Republicans and deal with free African Americans running around as well. So America must have a massive history lesson with June 1st becoming a National Day of Remembrance of the Tulsa Race Massacre. That's an opportunity for us to have a national conversation of not just the greatness of Black Wall Street, but that ties right into the Black Freedmen Indian Treaties of 1866. Okay, because that's how a lot of early African American landowners got land to build Black Wall Street, was from those treaties. All right. So we have to understand that, one, America needs a massive history lesson. Two, you have to use that history lesson as a platform to push the policies that have to be put in place to help repair the damage. And three, talk about how repairing the damage will benefit everybody in this country, not just African Americans, when white people are the majority of the people who have to vote for these laws. Now, if we were 70% of the population, it'd be totally different. With 13.5%. Okay. Right. And we only make up 2.5% of the U.S. Senate. And I say half because half the time Senator Tim Scott doesn't act like he's Black.
Well, hold on now. We about out of time.
He's against reparations, by the way.
Tim Scott is? Okay. If he jumps into the race.
He voted against the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. He blocked the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. Okay, he voted against Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. He voted against Kristen Clark being a deputy head of the Civil Rights Department of the Department of Justice. He's phenotypically Black, not consciously Black.
All right, now we got to wrap up because there's so much more that we can say about this. I want to get a quick 30-second prediction. Now, this was through an advisory board in San Francisco. Do you think this actually gets adopted by the elected officials in San Francisco?
The $5 million?
Yes, any of it.
I don't think the $5 million is. I think some of the other recommendations will. Now, the real test is what happens when lawsuits are filed. This is why you have to be on strong legal footing to withstand, because whatever you pass, laws get interpreted by the judicial branch of the government, and that can go to federal and it can go to the U.S. Supreme Court.
All right, we're out of time. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you, Michael Imhotep, for doing work today on the culture. Appreciate you coming through. Of course, we'll come visit you. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching. Please, if you are not already subscribed to my channel, I do have a little YouTube channel going on. Go over to Suzette Speaks. Just look it up on YouTube, Suzette Speaks. And I want to thank my brother Farajii Muhammad for allowing me to fill his very large shoes right here on The Culture. I appreciate all the Culture fam for watching, commenting, sharing, and for holding us down in general. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I'll be back tomorrow, also guest hosting. That's it for us today, y'all. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching.